In the 1840s, people from many ethnic groups, Irish, African, Jewish, German, and more, came to Arkansas. While the immigrants brought their varied religions, Protestant hymns took hold in an era where books and sheet music were rare. Hymns provided an important emotional and spiritual link to the lands they departed. African Americans would later adapt hymns and create a form of music called spirituals.
The people that came over to what is now the United States came without benefit of instruments or written music in many cases, so they had to take the tunes they knew and the songs they knew and devise a new form of music that was worshipful and met many needs for them.
One form of music created to meet this need was line singing, which is a form of call and response. A music director would quickly call out the first line and melody of a song, and the congregation would then sing out in its longer form.
There was a music director, and he would announce the name of the song to be sung, and then he would line out the first line give you the first line with the melody in it, and then the congregation would sing that line. The earliest songbook that I brought you is called literally a hymnal. This is what the individual worshiper had. He did not have a book with the music written out in it. He only had a book with the words of the hymns, with the notation which indicated whether it was CMs, common meter, SM, short meter, and LM, long meter.
As more Arkansans gained access to printed materials, a more harmonic style of worship music followed.
And then in the 1840s, we got to sing in the big book. The Sacred Harp was a book that had for the first time published the notes. So you get both the words and the music. And this was a revolution in especially Southern religious singing.
It wasn't without controversy. There were quite a few people that very rigidly wanted to stick to the old way of singing, the long drawn out, and there was another crowd that wanted to do more harmonic style singing.
There were not a lot of the books either. There were not a lot of them published in the area. If you got a hold to us, if you got your hands on a Sacred Harp book, it was sacred. I mean, you know, only important people like choristers and choir directors would have one even. And they would teach the song from there.
One of the popular songs at that time, which is still sung, is Amazing Grace. The original tonality is very open chords. It sounds a lot like a bagpipe.
Sacred Harp is written in what we call dispersed harmony, where each part has a melody, and each part has a melody that's important. So all fitting together is part of the fun of doing that.
Amazing Grace reminds you of where you used to be before Christ and to where you are as a result of not being blind to salvation.
African Americans would use these hymns as a musical source to express the injustice of slavery.
I guess we have to go all the way back. Before 1865, when Africans were brought over and when there was slavery, they were used to a different culture of music. They had rhythm and they did a lot of chants.
During the time when there was slavery, slaves couldn't say what they wanted to say, so they sung it.
Music was one of the few things these displaced Africans had. They found themselves in these newly settled areas of America like Arkansas, and they were in production, in the agricultural production, working constantly in the fields, and they had little other than literally the clothes on their backs.
They were not allowed to sing a lot in the fields and stuff because they were supposed to work. It seemed to be an offense to the slave masters when because they couldn't understand what was being said. They were still in their language, of course. They learned bits and pieces of English, and at that point they were starting to do songs, and that's when we start with the corn ditties. Corn ditties were the precursor to spirituals. So if they were singing something in a chant, and a bit of English came through, a bit of French, because there were also French-speaking slaves then. Whatever came through was just corn ditties, and it was they were out in the fields, and these were just little chants, little bits and pieces of songs. There were cotton fields in Arkansas more than anything else.
Cotton is a highly laborious agricultural production. It needed a lot of labor.
They were working in the fields at that time, so they called them field hollers. This stuff was heavy. Songs made the day go by faster. I remember my grandmother singing, just humming during the day, and she would be doing housework. And that would help her get finished with things faster. And I used to ask her, why are you singing all the time? She said, because my mama sang, and it made everything go faster when she was picking cotton. When I was picking cotton, we would sing in the fields, and it would make it easier and get the day over with. Work songs and field hollers were part of their daily lives. Spirituals was part of their spiritual life.
The first published book of spirituals was released in 1867. Slave Songs of the United States features 5 songs from Arkansas. This collection of spirituals reflects the changes in worship music in the early African American churches.
African Americans began to form their own churches during slavery. When they would go to their masters' churches with them, or they sat outside and listened to the songs, or they were inside, or wherever they were, they would go back and have their secret services in secret places. And that was the beginning of their churches that would get out under the trees. They would call it brush arbors. And they would sing, and they would hear, there was a preacher. They would hear him preach, and then they would sing more of spirituals.
It would be a total oversimplification and purely wrong to say that music just made their lives a delight. But music was a release, and one of the few things of value they had, you could say, was their own voice. From that, they could sing songs of humor, songs that expressed their faith or their hopes, songs that expressed their rebellion, usually highly disguised, and songs that were just used in labor production.
Some of the other, after they learned quite a bit of English, of course, the spirituals were used for something else. They were used as message songs. And that meant that they would use some of these songs to get to the Underground Railroad. They used Wade in the Water, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, songs like that, to let other slaves know that the train was coming, and they would be leaving by water.
When you begin to see the evolution of those songs to the individual and his own personal salvation, that's when we usually start referring to it as gospel music.
I love the Lord, He heard my cry.
Imagine yourself as a child or as a teenager during that time, after 1865, before 1900s. There were no city lights. There were no inside bathrooms, and you had to go to church in a wagon. You got there, and you could hear them. You could hear their feet stomping on the floor as the music, as they were coming in to the door. One of those old deacons was throwing out that call and response hymn.
Most churches have evolved to play praise and worship, but back before there was praise and worship, and before there was congregational hymns, they were singing Dr. Watts.
Dr. Watts is an African-American style that was created so that they could understand what was being said in the hymn. Now, Dr. Watts are also in hymn books, but the way that they did it made it easier. With African-American churches, we could see the song written that way, but orally it was taught a different way. So in the African American churches, they were doing songs by what was done orally.
Where the golden sunlight gleams.
Life is brief and life is hard, and life can be bitter. And so you're looking not only at the sorrow here in this life, but the joys in the life to come.
Those songs would be the ones that would help them through the week. It was inspirational to them.
From the lighthouse shine.
They will never go out of style. They will never, that music will never go out of style.
It was a music that touched the soul. It's a release for our emotions and thoughts, a promise of better things to come. And that's what all religious music is.
Shine on.